The summer heat was relentless. Emma Carter wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead as she stepped out of the train station and onto the crowded platform. The air felt heavy, thick with humidity and exhaustion. It had already been a terrible day, and all she wanted was to get home. She had just spent the weekend attending her cousin's engagement party, another family event that reminded her exactly where she stood in the Carter family hierarchy. At 31, Emma was considered the disappointment. Her older brother, Daniel, was a successful lawyer. Her younger sister, Chloe, was a social media influencer with thousands of followers. Meanwhile, Emma worked as a librarian and lived a quiet life in a small apartment. Her relatives never missed an opportunity to remind her of the difference. Still working at that little library, her aunt had asked with a fake smile, "Maybe someday you'll find a husband," another relative joked. Even her parents rarely defended her. By the time the celebration ended, Emma felt emotionally drained. Now she sat alone on a bench waiting for her train, trying to forget the cruel comments. That was when she noticed him. An elderly man sat several yards away beneath a broken shade structure. His clothes were worn and dusty. His gray beard looked untrimmed, and his hands trembled slightly as he leaned against a weathered backpack. Most people ignored him. Others openly avoided him. A few passengers glanced his way before quickly moving farther down the platform. Emma felt a familiar tug of sympathy. The temperature had climbed above 95 degrees. The old man's lips looked cracked from dehydration. Without thinking, she reached into her bag and pulled out an unopened bottle of water. As she stood, a sharp voice stopped her. "I wouldn't do that." Emma turned. A middle-aged woman sitting nearby shook her head. "Trust me," she said. "That old man is trouble." Several others immediately joined the conversation. "She's right. Don't give him anything. He hangs around here every week." Emma frowned. "What did he do?" The answers came quickly. "He's a liar, a scammer, a thief, always telling stories to get sympathy." One man snorted. "Last month he claimed someone stole millions from him. Can you believe that?" A few people laughed. Emma looked back at the elderly stranger. He wasn't bothering anyone. He wasn't asking for money. He simply sat there silently staring at the ground. Something about the scene didn't feel right. People seemed oddly eager to hate him. The old man slowly lifted his eyes. For a brief moment, Emma saw something unexpected. Not anger, not bitterness, just sadness, deep, crushing sadness. She made her decision. Ignoring the warnings, Emma walked across the platform. The conversations behind her stopped. She could feel people watching. When she reached the man, she held out the bottle. "Would you like some water?" The elderly man's eyes widened. For several seconds, he simply stared. Then he nodded. "Thank you." His voice was rough and weak. Emma sat beside him while he carefully drank. The relief on his face was immediate. After finishing nearly half the bottle, he smiled. It wasn't a large smile, but it was genuine. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. Emma laughed softly. "It's only water." "No," he replied. "It's kindness." Something in his tone made her pause. The man wasn't speaking about the bottle. He was talking about something much bigger. She opened her lunch bag and offered him a sandwich. His eyes filled with tears. "Nobody's shared food with me in months." Emma's heart sank. For the next 20 minutes they talked. His name was Arthur. He never asked for money. He never begged. Instead, he asked Emma about her job, her hobbies, and her dreams. Oddly enough, he seemed far more interested in her life than most of her own relatives. When the train finally arrived, Emma stood and gathered her things. "It was nice meeting you, Arthur." The old man smiled. "It was nice meeting someone who still sees people." Emma waved goodbye and boarded the train. As she settled into her seat, she felt strangely lighter. For the first time all day, she wasn't thinking about her family's insults. Instead, she thought about Arthur. About how lonely he seemed, about how quickly strangers had judged him. Hours later, after arriving home, Emma emptied her tote bag onto the kitchen table. A book, her wallet, keys, phone charger. Then she noticed something unusual. A yellowed envelope she had never seen before. Confused, she picked it up. Inside was a small brass key and a folded handwritten note. Her pulse quickened as she opened it. Only 7 words were written on the page. Trust no one who calls themselves family. Emma stared at the message. A chill ran down her spine. At the bottom was a single signature, Arthur. Emma barely slept that night. The mysterious note sat on her bedside table, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same 7 words, trust no one who calls themselves family. By morning, she had convinced herself there had to be some explanation. Perhaps Arthur had slipped the envelope into her bag by accident. Maybe it belonged to someone else, but deep down, she knew that wasn't true. The key and note had been meant for her. After work the next day, Emma returned to the train station hoping to find Arthur. The platform was crowded as usual. Commuters rushed past carrying briefcases and coffee cups. Teenagers laughed while waiting for trains. Vendors shouted from nearby food stands, but Arthur was nowhere to be seen. Emma searched for nearly an hour. Nothing. Finally, she approached an elderly janitor sweeping near the station entrance. "Excuse me," she said. "Do you know a homeless man named Arthur? Gray beard, old backpack." The janitor stopped sweeping. His expression changed immediately. "You know Arthur Bennett?" Emma froze. "Bennett?" The janitor nodded slowly. "Haven't seen him for several days. Do you know where he lives?" The man hesitated. "Not exactly. But years ago, before everything happened, everybody in this city knew who Arthur Bennett was." Emma's curiosity grew. "What do you mean?" The janitor glanced around before lowering his voice. Arthur wasn't always homeless. Those words hit Emma like a thunderbolt. "What happened to him?" The janitor shook his head sadly. "Depends on who you ask." Before Emma could ask more questions, the man's break ended. He handed her a small piece of paper. "That's an address connected to him, old storage facility on the east side." Then he walked away. Emma stared at the paper. The address matched a storage company she'd never heard of. Suddenly, the brass key felt much heavier in her purse. The next afternoon, she drove across town. The storage facility looked ancient. Rust covered the gates. Weeds pushed through cracks in the pavement. Most of the units appeared abandoned. Inside the office, a tired-looking manager examined the key. His eyebrows rose. "I haven't seen one of these in years. You recognize it?" Emma asked. The manager nodded. "Unit 214. Her heart raced. "Can I access it?" The manager studied her carefully. "Arthur told us years ago that if someone brought this key, they should be allowed inside." Emma's breath caught. He had expected someone, maybe even her. A few minutes later, she stood in front of Unit 214. Her hands trembled as she inserted the key. The lock clicked. The metal door groaned upward. Dust filled the air. At first glance, the unit looked ordinary. Boxes, filing cabinets, old furniture. But then Emma noticed dozens of neatly labeled containers stretching toward the back wall. Everything had been carefully organized. Someone had spent years preserving these records. She opened the nearest box. Photographs, hundreds of them, family gatherings, business meetings, award ceremonies. In every photo stood the same man. Arthur, only he looked completely different, confident, successful, respected. In one photograph, he stood beside a luxury office building with a ribbon-cutting ceremony taking place. In another, He was shaking hands with city officials. Emma stared in disbelief. This wasn't the man everyone mocked at the train station. This was someone who had once mattered, someone important. She moved deeper into the unit. A locked filing cabinet sat against the wall. Inside were stacks of legal documents, property records, court filings, medical evaluations, bank statements. The more Emma read, the more disturbing the story became. According to the documents, Arthur had once owned a thriving company worth millions. Then everything collapsed. His relatives had claimed he was mentally unstable. Control of his assets had been transferred. Properties sold, accounts emptied, businesses seized. Within 2 years, Arthur had lost nearly everything. Emma's stomach twisted. The paperwork looked suspicious. Signatures didn't match. Dates appeared altered. Entire sections seemed manipulated. It looked less like a legal process and more like a carefully planned theft. Then she found the journals, 6 thick notebooks stacked neatly in a wooden crate. The first page of the earliest journal contained a message. If you're reading this, someone finally chose kindness over fear. Emma sat down on a dusty chair and continued reading. Hour after hour passed. Arthur had documented everything: names, dates, conversations, evidence, every betrayal. Every lie, every person involved. Then, near sunset, a photograph slipped from between the journal pages. Emma picked it up. The moment she saw it, her blood ran cold. The picture showed a younger Arthur standing beside 3 men in expensive suits. She immediately recognized one of them, her father, Richard Carter. Emma's hands began shaking. Her father wasn't casually standing in the background. He was smiling beside Arthur like a trusted friend. Written on the back of the photograph were 4 chilling words: "The men who betrayed me." Emma stared at her father's face. Her mind raced. All her life, her parents had taught her that honesty mattered, that family mattered, that trust mattered. Yet here was evidence connecting her father to the greatest tragedy in Arthur's life. For the first time, Emma understood why Arthur's note had sounded like a warning. And for the first time, she began to fear what she might discover next. Emma drove home from the storage facility in a daze. The photograph rested on the passenger seat beside her, and no matter how many times she glanced at it, the image remained the same. Her father, standing beside Arthur, smiling. The words written on the back echoed through her mind. "The men who betrayed me." By the time she reached her apartment, darkness had fallen. She spread the documents, journals, and photographs across her dining table. For hours she read. The deeper she dug into Arthur's records, the worse the story became. Names appeared repeatedly. Lawyers, business partners, accountants, and among them, over and over again, was Richard Carter, her father. According to Arthur's journals, Richard had started as one of his closest friends. They had built projects together, shared business opportunities, and trusted each other completely. Then, when Arthur's company became successful, things changed. Arthur described secret meetings he wasn't invited to, financial reports that disappeared, unexpected legal challenges, and finally, the accusations that he was mentally unstable. As Emma turned page after page, a horrifying pattern emerged. The people who had helped destroy Arthur weren't strangers. They were the people he trusted most. The next evening, Emma drove to her parents' house. She carried the photograph in her purse. Her heart pounded as she walked to the front door. Her mother answered with a surprised smile. "Emma, we weren't expecting you." Her father sat in the living room watching television. Everything looked normal, ordinary, but Emma could no longer see them the same way. "We need to talk," she said. Her serious tone immediately caught their attention. Richard muted the television. "What is it?" Emma removed the photograph and placed it on the coffee table. The room fell silent. The moment her father saw the picture, his face changed. It lasted only a second, But Emma noticed. Shock, fear, recognition. Then it vanished. "Where did you get this?" he asked. The question came too quickly. Too sharply. "You know him," Emma replied. Her father leaned back. "That's Arthur Bennett. So it's true." Her mother's expression tightened. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Emma crossed her arms. "I found documents connecting you to him." Neither parent spoke. "I want the truth." Her father's jaw clenched. "That man lied to a lot of people." "Did he?" "Yes." Emma reached into her bag and removed several copied documents. "Then explain these." Richard barely glanced at them. "You don't understand business matters." The answer frustrated her. "Then help me understand." Instead, her mother stepped forward. "Emma, listen carefully. Arthur has been obsessed with blaming others for his failures for years." "Failures?" Emma asked. "He lost his company." "No," Emma replied. "According to these records, it was taken from him." Silence. The tension in the room became unbearable. Finally, Richard stood. His voice grew cold. "You need to stop investigating this." Emma blinked. "Why?" "Because you're digging into things that happened decades ago." "That isn't an answer." "It should be." The sharpness in his voice startled her. Her father rarely lost control. Tonight he seemed desperate. For the first time in her life, Emma felt genuinely afraid of him. Not physically, but of what he might be hiding. She gathered the documents. "Did you help destroy Arthur's life?" Neither parent answered. That silence told her everything. Emma left without another word. The following week became a whirlwind. She contacted the lawyer, whose name Arthur had listed repeatedly throughout the journals. To her surprise, the lawyer agreed to meet. The man was retired now, nearly 80 years old. After reviewing Arthur's evidence, he sighed heavily. "I wondered if this day would ever come." Emma leaned forward. "You believe him?" The lawyer nodded. "I always did." "What happened?" The old man removed his glasses. Arthur was betrayed. The simple statement hit harder than any dramatic explanation. "By my father." The lawyer hesitated, then nodded again. Emma felt sick. The lawyer revealed that several business partners had worked together to seize Arthur's assets. Legal loopholes, forged documents, and false medical claims had been used to strip him of control over his company. Most of the evidence had disappeared years ago. Most, but not all. Arthur had secretly preserved copies. The exact copies now sitting inside Storage Unit 214. As word spread among former employees and associates, more people came forward. Old records surfaced, forgotten witnesses shared stories, retired accountants revealed suspicious transactions. Piece by piece, the truth emerged, and suddenly, something strange happened. Family members who rarely called Emma began contacting her. Her aunt invited her to dinner. Her uncle left friendly voicemails. Even cousins who had ignored her for years suddenly wanted to reconnect. The reason became obvious. They were scared. Someone had warned them that Emma was uncovering information. And if the truth became public, many reputations could collapse. One evening, her father finally called. His voice sounded strained. "Emma," she remained silent. "You need to let this go." "Why?" "Because some truths hurt everyone." Emma looked at Arthur's journals spread across her table. For years, everyone had ignored his pain, mocked him, dismissed him, left him to suffer alone. Now the people responsible wanted silence. For the first time in her life, Emma refused to obey. She ended the call. Then she picked up the phone and contacted an investigative journalist. If her family wanted the truth buried, they had chosen the wrong daughter to stop it. The lies were already cracking. And soon, the entire world would see what was hiding underneath. The first article dropped on a Thursday morning. By noon, it had already spread everywhere. Once disgraced business mogul Arthur Bennett may have been wrongfully ruined. Emma stared at her phone. as notifications flooded in faster than she could read them. The journalist she had contacted had done exactly what she promised. She verified everything, cross-checked documents, interviewed witnesses, and built a story too solid to ignore. And now the world was paying attention. At first, the response was disbelief. Then came outrage. Then came panic. Former employees of Arthur's company began speaking publicly. Retired clerks confirmed signatures had been forged. A whistleblower from a legal firm admitted to pressure tactics used years ago to declare Arthur mentally unfit. Each new statement added weight to the truth, and each truth hit Emma's family harder. That evening, her father called again. This time his voice wasn't cold, it was shaking. Emma turned this off. She stood by her window watching the city lights flicker. "I can't. You're destroying this family." Emma's grip tightened on the phone. "No," she said quietly. "I'm exposing what destroyed another man's life." Silence. Then her mother's voice in the background, pleading, "Please, Emma, think about us." For a moment she almost laughed. Think about us. Nobody had asked Arthur to think about anyone when he was left with nothing. "I did think about you," Emma replied. "That's why I'm still talking." She ended the call. Within days, investigations escalated. Authorities reopened Arthur Bennett's case after nearly 2 decades. Financial crimes units seized archived records from banks. Court orders were issued to freeze suspicious assets tied to old transactions. Names began appearing in legal filings. One of them was Richard Carter, Emma's father. The shockwaves through the city were immediate. At work, people whispered when Emma walked by. Some looked at her with admiration, others with fear. She no longer cared which. What mattered was that the truth was finally breathing again. Arthur, meanwhile, reappeared. Emma found him sitting on the same train station bench where she had first met him. But he looked different now. Cleaner, healthier, still fragile, but no longer invisible. "They told me you opened the door," he said softly when she approached. Emma sat beside him. "I just showed people what was already there." Arthur nodded. "For years I thought I would die as a ghost." "You're not a ghost," Emma said. "You were buried alive by liars." For the first time, he smiled without sadness behind it. The hearings came a month later. Emma stood in a packed courtroom as evidence was presented piece by piece. Photographs, journals, financial trails. Witness testimonies. Her father sat at the defense table, older now, smaller somehow. When Emma was called to testify, she didn't hesitate. She spoke calmly about the train station, about the warning from strangers, about the envelope slipped into her bag, about how kindness had been the beginning of everything. Her voice never shook, but her father never looked at her. Not once, when the verdict was finally read, the room erupted. Fraud, conspiracy, asset theft, document forgery. Guilty. Richard Carter's face went pale as years of reputation collapsed in minutes. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. But Emma didn't stop. She walked away, not toward cameras, toward Arthur. Weeks later, compensation funds were recovered from hidden accounts and redirected into a new initiative, the Bennett Foundation for Abandoned Elders. Arthur insisted Emma's name be on it. She refused at first, but he simply said, "You were the one who chose water when others chose cruelty." So she agreed. On the foundation's opening day, Arthur placed a folded letter into her hands. "I don't have much time left," he admitted gently. Emma shook her head. "Don't say that." He smiled. "It's all right. I got to see justice." Later that night, he passed away peacefully in his sleep. No fear, no loneliness, only quiet relief. At his small memorial, Emma stood in front of people whose lives had been touched by his story. And for the first time, she understood something deeply. Revenge wasn't destruction. It was truth returning to its rightful place. Months later, Emma left her family home for good. No dramatic goodbye, no final argument, just silence where lies used to live. She continued working with the foundation, helping forgotten people rebuild their dignity. And sometimes at the train station where everything began, she would sit with a bottle of water in her bag, just in case someone needed it, because Arthur had been right about one thing. Kindness doesn't change just one life. It exposes an entire world, and sometimes it brings justice with it.